Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the New York Yankees. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. Perhaps, Dan, the Twins have come crashing down to reality after winning 6 straight series. They ran into the buzzsaw that is the New York Yankees. It felt like basically any other year's Twins teams, Dan, going up against these Yankees.
Yes, in a sense, but they were never going to win any of these games. Like, there wasn't like the collapse. There was nothing like that. Like, this was
That's
all
fair.
Just a beatdown. And so in a way, it was like, well, the Yankees are the better team.
Yeah, I suppose when you put it in that light, it's better? Or is it worse?
Yeah,
I don't really know.
I mean, it's better. Like, I think it's better.
We lost outright, and there was no ever hope of victory. I guess
hope.
That's the question of whether that's better or worse than the crashing of the hopes and dreams mid-game, as we're so used to against the Yankees.
I mean, they only got one run in this series, and it came in the first, was it at bat of the first game? It is just comically bad. And a couple things about this. It was weird because, like, I think a theme was a quality start was just not going to be enough against the Yankees, the way that they were pitching. And yet it felt like it should have been enough. You would think that if you can hold this Yankees lineup to 3 or 4 runs in the first 6 innings, you should have a chance. And it just didn't feel like this Twins team had a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how well you pitch if you score 0 runs, Dan. I mean, you're not winning baseball games. And so it is a shocking thing to think about that after the first inning of game 1, the Twins never scored another run.
No, nothing. But we will talk so much throughout this about the defense, specifically in the outfield, which was among the worst defense I think I have ever seen the Twins play in a 3-game series in the outfield.
It wasn't even AAA. Like, I mean, sometimes you joke about, like, at the majors, if a team isn't playing well, they're quadruple A. I don't know what level of baseball this was, Dan, but I don't think any level of professional baseball. And so it made me think about, they did that year with the bobbleheads where they had the whole nothing falls but the raindrops. No, Dan, this was everything falls with the raindrops. It was ridiculous. So many balls were landing in the field instead of in gloves.
Well, and you weren't on the podcast when Hogs and I talked about this, but he asked which 2 of the big 3, Royce Lewis, Carlos Correa, and Byron Buxton, that I wanted. At the time, I answered Correa for sure, and then Lewis. But all throughout this series, it was like, where is Byron Buxton? Where is that man? Because, gosh, they want him in the outfield right now.
Or, the guy who they signed to be his backup. We're going to talk about that. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's go ahead and jump into the series recap.
Series recap.
Game 1, Dan. Twins lose this one, as you mentioned, 5-1, never to score another run. Rodon on the mound for the Yankees. And to be fair, the only pitcher that the Twins saw in the entirety of the series who had an ERA above 4 was Ferguson in Game 2 in the 9th inning when the game didn't matter anymore. He has an ERA of 6, but he's the only guy the Twins saw who had an ERA that's above 4. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Yankees have the second best team ERA in baseball. So it's a very good staff, but still, Dan, the way that the Twins have put together some offensive outings, you think they'd be able to swing and put the ball to bat a couple of times.
You would think so, but it was just all about the misplays, right? So in the top of the first, Castro loses a ball in the sun, then drops the ball in the transfer, which allows Soto to go to second. Castro making a misplay in the outfield and Juan Soto taking advantage of it was a repeated theme here, far more often than you would think about such a specific occurrence.
It did seem to happen every inning, which is shocking, Dan. It really shouldn't happen that often between 2 players. But bottom first, as we mentioned, Jeffers hit a home run, and that is really the only highlight of this entire series. Top of the second, Castro misplays a ball by Wells. You're going to hear that a lot, too. Castro misplays a ball.
We also saw just some giants playing baseball. Giancarlo Stanton, who I feel like hasn't really been healthy over the course of his career, at least when they've kind of the times that they've played the Twins, he crushed a home run. And you said, David, I love this. He and Aaron Judge are just too big. They look They're just like giants in the batter's box.
So I went to one of these games, and when Judge was standing next to Correa, it was like, you know, those like kids museums or the science museum where they have the rooms that make one person look really big and one person look really small. They were right next to each other, Dan, and that's how it looked. You would think they were in that room in the Children's Museum.
We will talk more about those guys throughout the episode too. The Twins bullpen was a bright spot. They pitched 4 clean innings, but the offense couldn't get off the ground. And again, the Twins can't chase Rodon early, so the lefties don't get in until the 7th. And I thought this was funny. So Ian Hamilton comes in. He's a former Twin, and Rocco doesn't recognize the key thing about Ian Hamilton is that he has reverse splits.
No, they brought it backward. Tell them to turn it around.
You haven't got to talk about reverse splits in so long, Dan. I'm so happy for you.
So Rocco, of course, brings Kepler in a decently key spot, guy on base. And, of course, Hamilton gets him out because he's got much better splits against lefties than he does against righties. Twins go 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. And so this one ends in a 5-1 Yankees victory.
I hate the trend that's going to lead us to, Dan. Let's go into game 2. Twins lose this one 4-0. I was in attendance for this one, and I went, Dan, with a Yankee fan. But he was very gracious in his victory. It was very nice. But I was shocked how many Yankee fans were in my section. It had to be 80-20, like as far as Yankee to Twins fans. I think in the stadium, the ratio obviously was a bit higher Twins fans as opposed to Yankee fans. But I felt like I was in the Bronx right there, Dan.
Well, Willi Castro has another bad day in center field. He forgets that there's 2 outs, which is a problem when the bases are loaded, because then, was it Soto who scored then from third?
Probably. Soto was everywhere.
Was.
Willi Castro went to bed every night this series just having nightmares about Juan Soto taking bases from him.
And the best part is then, of course, the third out goes to Willi Castro. I mean, he turns and immediately chucks that baseball out of the stadium, or very nearly so, of deep right center.
It was weird to see a fielder do that. It very much felt like, remember when Trevor Bauer did it? When he was with the Guardians and he chucked from the mound to the outfield? Now, granted, outfielders throwing the ball into the stands at the end of an inning isn't that unheard of. Doing it the way Willi Castro did, where he seemed angry at whoever he was throwing at, which I assume was himself in this instance, that's a little bit less often. And then, of course, pitchers throwing the ball into the outfield. That never happened, Dan. That only happened once.
Well, it was as if like there was somebody up there that Willi Castro, like, can you imagine if, instead of the casual toss from the left fielder into the stands, the left fielder just chucked it at a fan?
It's like
at least Castro had the decency to throw it over all the fans. But yeah, poor Willi Castro. We'll talk about him more. The Yankees score early. They score in the first, the second, and the third. They finish with 13 hits. Marcus Stroman goes 6 innings, just 2 hits, 3 walks. Twins never seem to have a chance, which is too bad because Pablo Lopez actually had a pretty good start overall.
Yeah, he goes 6 1/3, 10 hits, which he sort of scattered. There were always Yankees on base, but only a few of them managed to make their way home. Only gives up 3 earned runs, only 3 strikeouts. He was in the zone, though, consistent. I mean, we know that Pablo doesn't like to walk guys, but when you're playing guys like Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton who will not allow you to make a mistake, you can't be getting by with these get-me-over fastballs to make it an 0-1 count. These guys swing so violently, Dan. Like, if they ever make contact, never once did either of those guys make contact with the baseball, and I thought, oh yeah, that's a single. Like, no, it's always extra bases, Dan.
Tons of hard-hit baseballs in this series. Kyle Funderburk comes in. He gives up the other run in relief. He still does get 4 outs. And then kind of a key moment, the bottom of the 8th, Correa is up with a couple guys on base. And, this is a moment where the Twins could potentially get back into this game. But he grounds into a 5-3 double play. The third baseman steps on third and throws across. But this was the first ground into double play of his season. This is Dan Hayes tweeted about this, and he had 30 last year. So it's not just his speed, right? I think he's just not hitting ground balls at nearly the rate that he was last year.
No, and it is sort of bad luck. Like, the ball could have very well gone foul, but third baseman made a great play, touched third through to first. And then moving to the top of the 9th, Correa sort of in response turns a great double play. He makes a great fielding play, steps on second, jumps over the guy sliding into second, and throws out Soto at first. A great play by Correa. You should go watch that highlight if you haven't got to see it. So a bit of an argument broke out, Dan.
Please attempt to be a gentleman.
Continue.
Between myself and one of the buddies I was at the game with. And it was on Aaron Judge's, I don't know, his 6th or 7th double that he hit in the game. I forget. I lost count, Dan, after the first one and the home run. But Aaron Judge hits the ball to center field. Willi Castro misplays it. He comes in a few steps, or maybe just 1 or 2 steps prior to retreating. He should have made the play. Most center fielders, if not all in the league, are going to make that play. I said this was a routine play that the center fielder should have made. My buddy said, no, that's not a routine play. It was 100 miles off the bat. It was a difficult angle. He says it's not routine. But to me, Dan, a routine play is just a play that should have been made. I mean, am I in the wrong here? Help me out.
I think you're in the wrong there. That was a really hard hit.
Who am I asking? Why do I even bother? I'm looking for solace. I'm looking for comfort. I'm looking for someone on my team. Going to Dan Thompson is not the guy I should be going to.
There's a difference between like routine and great. I would say that would have taken a great play to be able to read the ball off of the bat that way.
That's also his job. It wouldn't have been a great play. What are you talking about?
But this man was not brought into the majors to play center field. I think that's pretty clear after this. This is an infielder.
You can't make judgment calls. You can't say that because this player is playing at a deficit, it's not a routine play.
Yes, you can, right? If you put me out there, it's not a routine play. I can't.
You don't play center field in the majors, Dan. What are you talking? Oh my goodness.
Ogres are like onions.
Forget, you and Castro are the same person. I always forget when we start recording this podcast.
All right, Kip, let's move to game 3. There's not obviously a lot.
You're just saying it's not routine, that's all? You don't even want to talk about this?
I don't know if I'm going to convince you otherwise here. I think I've stated my claim. It's not routine. That's a very hard hit ball that you would have to play that perfectly, I think, to be able to make that catch. Even if Byron Buxton was out there, I don't know that he's able to make that catch. If he does, it's a great one, not a routine one.
No. What? No. You don't have to play it perfectly. You just have to not play it wrong. Castro played it wrong. That's the issue here, Dan.
All right. Enough. Can we move to game 3?
I don't know. You're the one holding us up now.
All right, fine. Okay. So the Twins lose this one again. This one is 5-0, so the Yankees made it a little less close. They get some runs right off the bat. So Volpe leads off with a home run. I will give Joe Ryan credit here. It was not right down the middle of the plate, and we've seen him do that. It was on an inside pitch. But then, things kind of unravel, which, by this point, Aaron Judge has, I think, 5 hits in the series. He had 4 in game 2 and 1 in game 1. And so it's pretty clear Joe Ryan was just trying to walk him or throw only low and away pitches, right?
Yeah.
But that comes back to bite him, but partially because of, again, some poor outfield defense.
I don't understand this. Kirilloff drops a ball out of his glove. It's not recorded as an error? Maybe I don't understand what an outfield error is, Dan. If you have the ball in your glove and you drop it, how do you not get credited with an error? There's no errors on this box score, Dan. So somebody please explain to me how this isn't an error other than, again, MLB trying to juice the stats of their beloved Aaron Judge, who maybe they love even more than you do, Dan.
All rise for Dan's Judge love.
There'll be more of that later, too. So then moving on in game 3, I thought there was a key moment in the 6th. Well, maybe it wasn't key for the outcome of the game, but it was a telling moment where, Aaron Boone is managing the Yankees, Rocco Baldelli manages the Twins, and Boone lets Wells, a left-handed hitter, stay in against Thielbar. And it's like the first pitch he gets a hit. And I looked this up. The Yankees coming into this game had the fewest pinch-hitting appearances in baseball with 13, and the Twins are tied for the most with 46. They're also not all that great at it. I think the Twins are kind of middling in terms of OPS with pinch hits, so it's not like it's improving that very much. But I thought that was an interesting contrast. Just a couple other defensive details here. Of course, top of the 6th, a ball lands in front of Margot, who I think Buxton catches that ball. I think he charges it. I think he's just more comfortable out there.
Would you say it's routine, or would you say...
Well, I would say...
I will concede that you could potentially argue that a routine play differs according to the player to some extent.
There we go.
But I would say that in general, there is a benchmark of what a routine play is. And I would say a routine play is any play that should be made by any given fielder at whatever position in the majors.
The definition of routine is very flimsy here.
That's why I was so upset about the matter-of-factness in which I was claimed to be incorrect because of my view on a routine play.
Anyway, and then
it's like the whole "I know it when I see it" situation here.
There you go. And then the top of the 7th, David, Judge has a double that, again, maybe a little bit less so because it's kind of up against the wall, but Margot is not comfortable enough in the center field, and he doesn't make the play there either. But a routine play
for Buxton, you'd say?
I think it might be. I will concede that maybe 3 of these plays, 4, maybe 5 of these plays, I think were routine Buxton plays.
There's so many, Dan. That's so many plays.
Okay, well, enough of this with the recap. Let's go on here to Puckett's Picks.
Touch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
I'm trying to find the silver lining to the gray cloud that was this series, but I love that I won. I do. Don't get me wrong. I'm really happy to have the victory to continue my win streak, but I don't feel good about it, Dan.
I think the funniest thing here is that the team high was Jeffers with 3. And this is a guy who hit a home run in the series, and he even still only had 3 points. You can see, folks, if you ever want to look at the scoring too, it's in the description of our podcast, so you know how this breaks down. But David wins with Correa with 2 points after his double double, really, in Game 3. I finished second with 0 for Eddie Julian. And then Hogs picked Kepler, who had -1, and the listeners picked Santana, who had -1. Just nobody stepping up here. But I would argue that, well, we'll talk about Correa a little bit later, but that's where it stands now. And David, you have extended your season victory total to 7. You lead Hogs, who has 4.5. I have 2.5, and the listeners just have 2.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
I like, Dan, that you picked the guy who won Puckett's picks for me. Why don't you go ahead and talk about Correa?
Yeah, I picked Correa because he can play defense, and he had 3 hits, and he was clearly the best and most effective player for the Twins out here, giving them a chance.
I want to build a championship culture.
It was a shame he didn't come up with a big hit with runners in scoring position. That's kind of what was missing. But after his home run, Jeffers was kind of a non-factor, so that's why I went with Correa.
I mean, there's not a lot of picks here, Dan. I am going to go with the Twins bullpen, though. They only gave up 2 earned runs in 10 1/3 innings pitched. I mean, we'll take that all day. And again, it doesn't really matter how well you pitch if you can score no runs. But I think the Twins did pretty well against what we've already said is a powerhouse Yankee lineup.
Yeah, it's a shame that you can't swap out these things, and take this bullpen effort in some previous games when it kind of fell apart. But I get that that's kind of how this works. It's hard to get everybody on your team playing together well at the same time.
Well, and really, were the Yankees trying? I mean, once the Twins got to the bullpen, they're like, you know what? We're already up. Let's just go home. We got dinner reservations. Let's get moving.
So for my bench, I went with Kirilloff, who is mired in a pretty ugly slump. It's like 1 for his last 25 or something like that. Didn't look good. Not great quality at bats. They need him to be the guy that turns it around next. Jose Miranda's not hitting well either, but I just think we're expecting more out of Alex Kirilloff. And again, he had moments in the series he could have stepped up, but he didn't.
Yeah, I got to go with Willi Castro. I feel
Shocker.
bad about this because
I can't imagine.
I was so frustrated at the game. I was quite annoyed watching all of these things take place right before my eyes. But the thing is, he went 2 for 11, which is better at the plate than most of the team. So it's sort of hard to put him on my bench. But again, the mistakes kept coming. Forgetting how many outs there are, Dan, is pretty unforgivable. Most of the fans at the stadium, Dan, they have access to the same screens that you do, Willie. Like, you can see how many outs there are. They're big boards all over the place that show you exactly how many outs there are. How can you forget? And then not just that, but the other play, the lackadaisical transfer to allow an extra base. You're by yourself, Dan. That's akin to playing catch by yourself and dropping the ball, Dan, which I would argue, like, I'm no professional, baseball player or any sort of athlete by any stretch of the imagination, maybe a sumo, but as far as like throwing a ball in the air and catching it, Dan, I don't drop that often. And if all you're doing is taking a ball out of a glove, I think I might be 100% at that, Dan.
This discussion pushes nicely into what I want to say in Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
I want to get your thoughts on this too, but after Game 2, Rocco defended Castro and saying, things like, he is his worst critic, I don't have to pile it on. I get that. He used him at third base in Game 3, which it's pretty clear, Castro needed a break from playing outfield here after that. But the defense was so bad. And like you pointed out, it wasn't just the physicalness, it was the mental aspect of this.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, is this at all on Rocco for not having these guys mentally prepared enough? Like, is this an indictment of his laissez-faire kind of approach to management?
Well, if I understand it right, Dan, he has guys playing baseball to warm up. Like, they're shagging balls and taking at bats. They're doing things that he has never done before. So you would think he would have tightened this ship right up, making them take grounders before the game, Dan. I don't understand how this is happening this season with Rocco's hard-nosed approach to making them do warm-ups every day.
I see. You're being ironical. I think that's what you're doing.
Is that what I'm doing? I didn't catch it, Dan.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that this does have to at some point come to the manager too, both setting guys up, but just reminding them of basic things like how many outs there are, or just like your head's got to be in the game. And I just wonder at some point that comes down to preparation, and the preparation comes down to the manager.
Well, at the same time, Dan, these guys just might not be very good. I mean, you've already defended Castro saying that he's not meant to be playing in center field, and that's probably accurate. Kirilloff also has been moved around quite a bit. He's probably most at home at first base, but he's not good there either. So I don't know how much of this can be, well, Rocco needs to be better, and how much of it is, well, I mean, if you're given a certain amount of Play-Doh, you got to do what you can with it, Dan.
Ogres are like onions.
A Play-Doh reference. That's good. I like that. That's
good.
And I guess this comes back to, Manuel Margot fits into this discussion, but I should pass it over to you. You're going to talk about some of these things.
Well, clearly, Dan, Game 2, bottom 9, I'm at the stadium. I'm ready for a Twins comeback. And I knew in my heart of hearts, Dan, that Rocco was clearly trying to save this baseball game with 2 outs. When Kirilloff's spot comes up in the lineup and Rocco said, no, sir, I know what's going to turn this game around with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning. I'm going to pinch hit Manny Margot for Alex Kirilloff.
Don't give me hope.
I mean, in that moment, we were all kind of wondering the same thing.
Why? What are you doing, Rocco? What are you doing? I don't understand it. Kirilloff played today. He's not injured. Were you just like, well, this is the move I have to make. Like, I am Rocco, must make move. Righty, no. Lefty, no.
Hang on a minute. We could use a pinch.
Anyway, but you had more things to say here about game 1.
Yeah. So game 1, a conversation was being had between the media and Rocco and Chris Paddack because Chris Paddack had been perhaps tipping his pitches. Now, Rocco and Paddack both deny this. And they're like, no, like maybe if guys were really making really good contact, okay. Did you look at your stat lines in game 1 there, Chris? Like the law enforcement officer? Do you see that he gave up, Dan? He gave up 12 hits. I don't really care how hard they're hit. Unless you're Griffin Jacks, like those hits were not by accident, right? Like those happened because you pitched poorly. And what I don't understand about this, you can go online, go to John Boy Media's Twitter page, listen to him talk as Paddack is pitching and John Boy calling what pitches are being thrown. And you can see it. If you go watch the replay, clearly, if he's throwing a fastball, he holds his glove up at the letters. If he's throwing a breaking ball, it's down at his belt. Or vice versa. I forget which is which. But the Yankees figured it out, Dan, and that's what really matters. It doesn't matter if I understand it or not. The Yankees clearly see this. So I don't quite understand the thought process of being like, no, clearly this isn't happening. Yes, it is, because everybody can see it. As soon as you see it, it's one of those things you can't unsee, Dan.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
No, we shouldn't have gotten Dan his own Sounders bar. If you're wondering why there's so many Sounders this episode, Dan is now in full control of making his own Sounders. It's a dangerous precedent we've set here.
Right there. Touch of a button. Yeah, it's pretty clear. This is a problem. Chris Paddack needs to. But isn't this like basic? This can't be this easy. I mean, this is Little League stuff, right?
It does seem a little bit obvious if it's truly like your glove position and not like a slight variant that it really took, CSI wasn't on the scene to crack this case, Dan. There was no forensic evidence necessary. Chris Paddack, first of all, he uses a glove, Dan, that's bigger than my head. It's giant. And so if more or less, Chris Paddack is sitting on the mound with a giant flag, waving it ahead of time. Like, you'd think he's giving military directions in continental warfare. During the Revolutionary War, he's out there giving his directions to everybody. No, he's sitting on the mound telling the Yankees what pitch he's throwing, Dan. I don't understand it.
Let's move on here to the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
So I know that you were at game 2 and I was not. I was watching at home, but it was pretty clear to me that when Aaron Judge hits that home run, it was very indicative of how the Twins were seemingly just staring at the pinstripes all series. They looked overmatched, and it seemed that they just had, it was like, all right, well, we're playing the Yankees again. And I know that we talked about this a little bit earlier, but just this sense that like the Yankees were in town, the Twins were going to lose, and they were going to get beat down. And it was in that 467-foot home run that it just kind of came together.
I'm going to go with game 2 also. So I was there, and I was right next to the bullpen, and there was a Yankee fan in front of me, Dan, and he'd been sort of like talking to the bullpen guys as much as he could, which obviously, I mean, I would as well, right? If I was a visiting fan, I do think that players probably pay a little bit more attention to fans, if they're in a visiting ballpark and they see their own fans there, because
Totally.
It's a bigger deal, right? Like, of course, You can see Twins fans talking to Twins players. But anyway, so they're sort of talking back and forth. And through this conversation, the fan traded some beef sticks he had brought for a ball from a Yankee reliever, which I just thought was so funny. And I told the guy, actually, I'm like, hey, man, I know that you're talking nicely to him and stuff, but like, careful leaning over the rail because I've seen guys get tossed from those seats like a lot of times for John at the opposing bullpen. I don't think that was going to happen in this instant, but just a cool moment. Like, it's kind of fun to see that interaction between a player and a fan. And it was just, the best part was the I don't know which reliever it was for the Yankees, because he like takes a bite of it and he turns to the guy and goes, "This is spicy." Like, I just thought it was just a funny interaction.
He responded to the fan.
Yeah, he ate it. He opened it and started eating them right away.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Shows you how comfortable the Yankees were in the confines of Target Field.
They could have been up on the concession stand. I mean, they could have been walking around. They basically feel that they own Target Field, and they certainly proved that with this particular outing.
All right, well, I think that's a good transition here into Mauer's musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
So, Dan, clearly this team needs some help. help, and Buxton is likely to return soon. However, may I offer up to you, Dan, Kersey Jr., who's currently playing for the Saints, not on the 40-man roster, which could be a bit of a problem. But Dan, he's got 147 at-bats this season. He's batting .299 with an on-base percentage of .390, with an OPS of .934, Dan. He's center fielder. He seems to be competent. Why haven't the Twins made that move, Dan?
I think I know why, David. Do you know where he sits on the prospect ranks for the Twins in their top 30?
No.
He's not in the top 30. And so I think that's why, is for some reason he's not worthy, even though he's playing this well. I think that's weird. But no, I just think that they don't see him there. Now, Emmanuel Rodriguez is playing down at AA, and he's playing center field, and he's playing pretty well. I think we are more likely to see him. But I really think in the short term, they're counting on Buxton coming back so they can, send probably Martin down, I think, at this point. But at some point, why do Kyle Farmer and Manny Margot? And I know we talked about this last time, and then they kind of responded. But at some point, aren't the younger guys better off on this roster?
Maybe. I don't know that anybody was going to be able to save this series. But yeah, moving forward, especially against the Guardians here, a big series to see the Guardians. Let's come away with a couple of victories. I think that somebody's going to have to step up, Dan. Whether it's Margot or Farmer or one of these young guys, somebody's got to figure out how to swing the bat appropriately.
So my question for you is, in 3 weeks, it'll be early June, and the Twins will go to Yankee Stadium. Do you think that this team can win a game and potentially win a series at that point, given that, there might be, maybe Royce Lewis is back in this team, or maybe they just need a change of scenery to beat this team?
I think that they could win a game, certainly, and depending on the pitching matchups, I think that Bailey Over would have had a better outing against the Yankees than any of the guys who took the mound this time around. And again, Chris Paddack might have a much better start, Dan, if he wasn't telling the Yankees what he was throwing ahead of time. So I think, yes, it is possible they win the series. Are they going to go to New York and sweep? No. Would I be happy if they go to New York and win 1 game out of 3? Yes. But if they win 2 out of 3, Dan, that's not only a victory, that's a moral victory as well, Dan, just to show that this series was off, that the guys weren't playing well. Hopefully they can turn it around and, like you said, get some reinforcements by the time they head to New York.
Series grades.
It's an F, Dan. No offense to speak of. 0 for 13 with runners in scoring position. 14 hits in the entire series. You can't do much with that, Dan. You have to put guys across home plate in order to win games. And no matter how good the pitching was, I feel bad about this score because, again, I don't even think that 5 runs against this Yankees lineup is crazy. Where, I don't think this is a lost cause. How dare the pitching give up? You're playing against a lineup that seems like an all-star lineup. Anytime we play the Yankees or the Dodgers, it's frustrating to me how many of those guys I know. You know what I mean? You read their lineups and you're like, yep, I know him. 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 And you get down to the 7, 8, and 9 batters, and you're like, why do I know all of these people? I couldn't tell you who's batting 7th for the Diamondbacks, right? But what's happening right now? These guys are their lineups are so stacked that you really got to be on your A game, and you can't do what this Twins team did, which is forget how to play defense. And honestly, they couldn't swing the bat no matter what the situation.
That's a great breakdown. Mine, using my rubric, advanced retreat, I call this a 2 out of 10. It's a long way to September, and there's a lot of baseball left to be played, but it was a pretty big step back, certainly from the bats standpoint. Now, I took to heart your criticism last time, and I've actually split my well-played baseball into 3 categories.
3 categories.
So... Well, because I couldn't leave out pitching. So I have offense, defense, and pitching. Because pitching is kind of both.
And
it's
they're
kind
each
of
out of 5, Dan?
Well, yeah. So now it's a 25-point rubric. So
okay.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
I know what I'm doing here. This is a pretty clear change. So offense, I gave a 0 out of 5 because you scored 1 run. Defense, 1 out of 5 because some people did play well in the infield. Miranda had some nice plays. Santana didn't screw things up. And pitching, we got a 4 out of 5 because honestly, like you just said, it could have been a whole lot worse. They held them in the games. So that comes out to be 7 out of 25, which is 28%, which is enough.
Okay. Dan, I
just multiply it by 4. That's easy.
You wouldn't have to if you just did normal scoring like anybody else. I don't understand this sick necessity that you have to make sure that the math is as complicated as possible for a pretty straightforward segment, Dan.
I'm a teacher. This is what I do. I overcomplicate things. Just ask my students.
That's not a good trait to have as a teacher, Dan.
It's just who I am. I've tried to change it, David. I can't figure it out.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
You found a way to succeed, Dan. Okay. Let's keep moving here. Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
kind of quiet, Dan, around the league outside of really more TV issues. So everybody keeps talking about Diamond Sports and how it's like 13 million fans can't watch games for their teams any longer. And then MLB, what do, Dan, in the midst of all this? You know what? Let's sign an exclusive streaming deal with Roku. Who, Dan, is that a channel? Is it an app? What is it exactly? Like, I have a Roku. Like, I have one of those and it has all the apps on it. Like, is there one that's just going to be like baseball on Roku? Like, what's happening, Dan?
It's like a stick, isn't it? Or is it the Amazon Fire Stick or something?
No, yeah, they got a whole bunch of different ones.
You plug it into the side of your TV and things show up. It is curious. There's no unity here. There's no unity, right? You're trying to make a cool balanced schedule, but you're doing nothing like that with the TV rights. It's a mess, right? And now we're seeing other threats to Bally Sports and this and that, kind of like an or else argument, that works really well in parenting. So I don't know.
I love how the MLB is trying to leverage them in the court system, saying like to Comcast, like, you're forcing people not to be able to watch the Royals compete for a division. And it's like, that's the best. And then they're like Ramirez for the Guardians made some players, had some stat line that like was important in MLB history. And it's like, these are your arguments. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know that a jury of your peers are going to be like, you know what? Comcast, you're in the wrong here because people aren't able to watch the Royals because they're only 2.5 back for the lead of their division. That's the best you got, MLB?
Right. Not great argumentation. And speaking of which, the Twins game is on Apple TV on Friday. So there you go, Twins fans. Maybe this is good.
If you're a Twins fan who has an Apple TV subscription and you're looking to loan it out for an evening, if you can go ahead and shoot us a Twitter message, that would be just fantastic.
All right, David, let's go on here. Speaking of that Guardian series, a big series in the Puckett's Picks.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's Picks.
Gets a little trickier, Dan, when you don't have guys scoring 16, 17 points in the series. Listeners are going to take Correa because obviously his powerhouse performance in this last series winning me Puckett's Picks with 2 points. Hogs takes Larnach. He picked next, and then it'll be you, Dan.
Yeah, you know what? Give me Max Kepler. If anybody's going to have a great game in Cleveland. Do you remember the time he hit 3 home runs off of Trevor Bauer in one game?
I do, Dan.
Yeah,
I still love that they play that song for the dancing camera on the Jumbotron at Target Field. Obviously, the tech team, Dan, at Target Field are listeners of the show.
Well, and who are you going to pick?
I was hoping to take Kepler, to be honest. I was really hoping that he was going to fall to me. I think that Kirilloff is terrible. I think that Willi Castro can't get his mind right. I think Miranda just is not good overall. Julian is striking out all of the time. Santana is really hit or miss. Doesn't leave too many options, Dan, but I'm going to go with the guy who would have won it this particular outing. I'm going to go with Jeffers.
Clever girl.
I think it's the right pick in that spot. All right, David. Heading into this series, hopefully the Twins can do a little bit better here. One other note, by the way, we won't see Topa for a while either. The relief pitcher that the Twins got in the trade for Jorge Polanco with the Mariners, because he quarter tore his tendon in his knee, 25% of it, I guess. He's got 6 more weeks before throwing. Royce Lewis has ramped up activities, so that's good, right? But he's still waiting for his muscle to fully heal. And hopefully, I guess, we'll see Byron Buxton make this trip to Cleveland.
I bet he will. I'd be kind of surprised if he didn't, actually.
All right. Well, David, how about you go send us out?
Will do. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Men for the Win and find our Men for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Link in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kuvis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.